workshop. My name is Danielle Walsh. I'm an admission counselor at Stonehill College. I'm also an alumna of the class of 2018. So I'm really not that far removed from the student life side of things. I was in your shoes very recently-ish, writing my college essay. I am a third-year counselor at Stonehill. I recruit primarily in Vermont, upstate New York, Western Massachusetts, and then the 495 corridor in Massachusetts on like this side of the state. And I read approximately 800 college essays every year. And believe it or not, my favorite part of the application is actually the essay. And I recognize that when I was a student, when I was in your shoes, I had absolutely no idea what to write my college essay on. I didn't know how to make myself unique or stand out. I think a workshop like this may have helped me in the past to learn a little bit about what admission counselors are looking for in an essay, but I've come full circle now in that in my third year, reading the essay in the application is truly my favorite part. The Common Application, I'm sure you're familiar with it now. All of it is, checking off boxes and filling in blanks and all those little drop-down boxes, right? But the essay is really where I get to hear your voice for the first time. And that's pretty cool. You get to talk directly to me. I get to hear your story, and you get to share something with me that I might not know otherwise in the application had I not read your essay. So I want to assure you that I do read your essays. You take the time to write it, so I'm going to take the time to read it. And I do really enjoy reading your essays. All of the work that you put into it does not go to waste. I promise you that the work that you're doing is being valued. So, some common essay topics that I see on a year-to-year basis. I get a lot of essays on sports. We're a Division II school, so we do heavily recruit athletes. But I get a lot of sports essays, anything from a sports injury to what we call the Friday Night Lights essays. So it's like the last game of the season, you're under the Friday Night Lights, and maybe the fourth quarter, and you're down by a touchdown or two, and kind of that comeback, or the underdog essay, or what I learned from being on a team. So I've learned how to be a leader. I've learned how to work with other people. I've learned how to be compassionate. I've learned how to be a leader on a team. That's something that I see a lot of. I also see a lot of essays about mission trips and community service. We are a Catholic institution as well. We have a lot of students who take part in community service, so I see a lot of community service essays from my prospective students. A lot about mission trips that you may have gone on over the summer with your church, as essays about communities that you served and kind of how that changed you as a person, and how you want to then go and turn around and change the world, which I think is very admirable. And then also the inspirational relative essays. So maybe that's a parent or a grandparent, an aunt and uncle, a cousin, a brother, a sister, whomever it may be, someone in your life who has inspired you in some way, kind of throughout your journey when you're learning from them. So there's just some really common essay topics. And if you've already written your essay and you might have used one of these topics, I don't want to scare you. There are ways to do these common topics in ways that may be a little bit different than the way you thought about in the first place. So what I want from an essay, especially for one of these common topics, is for you to tell me something about your past, something that has happened to you, something that you have experienced, something you have learned, and how that is now influencing who you want to be in the future. College is a very transformative experience. You're going to be learning a lot about yourself and about the world and other people in 4 years, and you might be a completely different person than you were when you were applying to college. So while I'm excited to learn about who you are now and who you've been in the past, I also want to learn who you want to be in the future and what you're hoping to get out of college, what you're hoping to learn, where you're hoping to go. So maybe you had an injury from a sports game. Maybe you then had to go to physical therapy to recover from that injury, and you had a physical therapist or a nurse that was so inspirational to you that you decided to become a physician's assistant or a nurse. So you're taking that thing that happened to you in the past, what you went through, so that injury, that physical therapy, and then turning that around to, I want to be a physical therapist or a nurse or an occupational therapist because of the experiences that I had. These people inspired me to then go on to become something else like them. I hope that makes sense. If you're writing about someone who has inspired you, whether that is a grandparent, any sort of relative, maybe that's someone that you met on a mission trip while you were serving alongside a community, I want to learn about who inspired you, yes, how they did it, and then also what you learned from them. The college essay is all about you. It's about your voice, you're talking to me. And if you're writing about someone that has inspired you, whether that's a grandparent or someone else, well, it's great to give me a little bit of background about who they are as context, so I know that they are your grandparent or they are your mom's sister, whomever they may be to you. I don't want a biography about them. I don't want a 5-paragraph essay about your grandmother. And while I'm sure your grandmother is a wonderful person and I'd be honored to meet her, the college essay is about you. I'm admitting you to college, not your grandmother. So if you're writing about someone that has inspired you, make sure to also include why they inspired you, how they inspired you, what you learned from them. I can't tell you enough how many times I've just gotten like a 5-paragraph essay that details my grandmother was born in this year and in this place. And while I like the biography and it may be well written, I also want to learn about who you are and what you have learned from that person. I hope that makes sense. So my general advice here in terms of writing your college essay is to write a few drafts. Do not do this the night before you apply to college. I will know if you have done this the night before you apply to college. I can tell when students have written this maybe once and not really touched it ever since then. It's important to write a few drafts just to make sure that you really do evolve your essay as it goes. I was not a proofreader in high school, but I think it's important to write a few drafts to really get the flow going. Try a few different prompts. So there's a couple different prompts on the college application on the Common App. Try a few different ones if you have the opportunity to do so. You might think that you want your essay to go one way with one prompt, and then you get writer's block, or it's just not working, or something just doesn't feel right. Another prompt might be best for you. So be open to trying a few different things and knowing that if you start something and it's not going the way you want it to, you can change it. Our earliest application deadline is November 1st, so you have some time to change it. And then my last piece of general advice, please proofread it. Please proofread your college essay. Please proofread your college essay. It is bold, it is underlined, it is italicized for a reason. Have someone else look at it, have a guidance counselor look at it, have a teacher look at it, have a friend look at it, have a parent look at it, have your barista look at it. I don't know, have someone else read your essay. It's so important to proofread. I cannot tell you how many mistakes I see in a college essay every year. My advice to you here is to write it in a Word document or in like a Pages first, just so you can get that, grammatical error or that spelling error. Don't write it in like a note on your phone and then copy and paste it. Seriously, write it in a Word doc first. You'll get that spelling advice, grammatical advice. It's really helpful, I think, to write it in a Word document first. Sometimes I will let you know that the Common App, the formatting can be a little bit different. So if you're trying to copy and paste it from a Word document to the Common App, it might not format correctly. So you might have to actually like retype it into the Common App, but at least if you put it in a Word document or in Pages first, that your writing and your grammar and your syntax and all of that is correct. I cannot tell you how many grammatical, even spelling mistakes I see in a college essay, and proofreading it and like having good grammar and having good spelling, it just shows that you're paying attention. You're taking that extra step to make sure that this is the best version of the draft that it can be, because this is what we as admission counselors are reading. This is what we're seeing. So proofread. So what I want to do now, hello, there we go, is show you some samples of some college essays. So what I'm going to do is stop sharing my screen now. What I'm going to do, nope, I'll do that. I'm going to share my screen again. So these are some essays that I want to take some time to read together. I hope you can all see this. I have a few different essays that we can read together. This is one that I really enjoy. I want to give you a couple of minutes to read it here. I'm not going to give you too much time. This is kind of a little bit of a longer one. But maybe if, like, when you're done, if you could give me a thumbs up emoji, like in the reaction, or put it in the chat just so I know, 'cause I can't see you all, so that I know you're done reading. So I'll give you some time to read it, and then I'd like to discuss these essays a little bit together, kind of what you liked, what you didn't like, and what you noticed, especially given the advice that I just gave you. So I'm going to stop talking. Enjoy this essay. Maybe like 1 more minute. I see that some of you have finished. All right. So I hope you've all finished that, or at least gotten most of the way through that essay. But really, I'd like to ask, maybe if you feel comfortable unmuting and speaking, or if you'd rather put it in the chat, maybe some things that you liked about this essay, some things that you didn't like about this essay, some things that you may have noticed given the advice that I just gave, things that you would do differently, any kind of opinions that you have about this essay. Feel free to just unmute and say that, or put it in the chat if you feel more comfortable. Okay, so we have one chat here about the word choice. I agree. I thought that the vocabulary was really um, strong in this essay. I felt like I could really smell the garlic. I could really envision kind of the moment that the student had with their grandmother every weekend. I did appreciate the word choice as well here. I think that the essay gives a bit too much detail about the grandmother, but it doesn't. I agree. I think that there was a lot of information about the grandmother, but I think that they did it in a way that wasn't necessarily like a biography about them, but it didn't give too much insight into the student's life. I do agree with that. I thought that there could have been more about what the student learned from their grandmother. And kind of really got to that at the bottom. I thought that the final sentence was pretty powerful, but I think that there was a little bit missing kind of throughout the essay. Um, but they did a good job of kind of painting that picture of why this moment was important for their family. Great observations. Other thoughts, other things that people feel about this essay? We can move on to another one if we don't have anything left about this one. Okay, we can move on to another essay. Can I like to move to a different one? Just close out of this one. This is a good essay, but it's a little bit long. That one's also long. We'll do this one. So this is a bit of a longer essay. I think I can get into one. There we go. So feel free to go ahead and start reading this one. I'll stop moving my mouse so that it stops doing that annoying thing at the top. Just a couple of minutes to read this one. I know it is a little bit longer, but I think it's a good one to read.
I don't know if this is just me, but I can't see it.
You can't. Okay. Let me stop sharing and try again. Thank you for letting me know. How about now?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for letting me know. All right, so I'm seeing some thumbs up that we're done. I'm just going to give it maybe another minute, and then same thing in the chat if you want, or if you want to unmute, things you liked, things you didn't like, things you do differently, that sort of thing. Okay, I hope everyone has read the majority of this one. I know it is a little bit more dense than the last, but again, what do we like? What do we not like? What did we notice about this essay that was different from the last essay that we read? Any observations at all? I think this essay was really different, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. That it was a unique idea. I agree. Uh, I would never think of doing something like this with my friends, but I think that it is kind of an interesting way to try to quantify what is sometimes mostly represented as a quality, like happiness. So I think I agree. I think it was a unique idea. Other thoughts about the essay itself? Was a little bit more dense, I think, than the last essay, but I think the student packed a lot of information in a short amount of space. I liked that they not only focused on the good parts, but they also talked about how they got through the bad days. I agree. I think it's important to note that some days are happy and some days are not so happy, but we get through them, right? It's all about, kind of an ebb and flow and up and down, pits and peaks, as we like to say at Stonehill. Um, I was so confused at first. I was like, oh, why is this person writing random numbers, these ideas? But I understood when it started to build. I agree. I was confused at first too when I first started reading this essay. I was like, well, okay, 14, like what does that have to do with making spaghetti for dinner? Interesting idea, but I think that the student built it well, and explained it and gave those different examples of what might be a high, a low, and then another high to kind of build that as they went. I was confused at first too. So I don't know what 14 has to do with spaghetti. Shows unique experiences the writer had while also connecting them back to a general idea that was very unique. I agree. One thing I really liked about this essay is that a lot of these experiences were unique, but they were also just kind of like day-to-day things. But I learned a lot about this student based on this idea that they had about the spreadsheet. So yes, it might just be, a Parmesan top spaghetti dinner, but I know that they like Parmesan top spaghetti for dinner. I know that they really value their family and that they are a musician. I know that, writer's block sometimes affects this student. And I know that, they categorize these things, they catalog these things, but they're also very in tune with what they like and what they don't like. I wouldn't have gotten that information about this student outside of this essay and the common application. I wouldn't have known that, meditation is something that's important to them, or, this excursion through downtown Seattle for their project is something that's important to them too, which I appreciated learning a little bit more about, while also learning about this really unique idea that the student had. So thank you for participating in that. I am just going to stop sharing my screen. So I think those two essays were good to kind of read about. What I do want to do now, again, in theory, share my screen. again and go back to my PowerPoint. So those are some good essay samples. I also want to talk to you a little bit about some office favorites. So I asked my colleagues today to kind of give me their favorites, some essays that they remember over the past few years. And I asked them to focus on the ones that were unique, that stood out to them, but also were ones that kind of described an everyday object or an everyday kind of task or thing that the student may have done or experienced that they wrote their essay on. So one of my colleagues told me about an essay where a really strong student athlete wrote about actually valuing learning to cook over his athletic accomplishments. So he set out with a goal to learn how to, grill hamburgers and make that perfect summer meal for his family. And he valued what he did as a chef, or what he did as a grill master, if you will, over what he accomplished on the field. I had another colleague who told me about an essay where a student wrote about her hair and how her hair had different textures to it, and the underside of her hair was really kind of gnarly and strangly, and it wasn't really agreeable, and it was kind of hard to brush through, and that represented the less agreeable sides of her personality, whereas the top side of her hair was kind of smooth and a little bit straighter, sleek, and that represented the agreeable sides of her personality. And how together they formed, her hair that she has to maintain every day, but also reflective of her overall personality. I had another colleague who told me about a student who wrote a recipe for their essay, and the different ingredients in the recipe were parts of their personality and parts of the things that they like to do, who they are as a whole. And they had kind of added ingredients that you could mix in if you wanted to, and those represented the aspects of their personality that may have needed a little bit more work and that weren't always present in the overall recipe or her overall personality herself. I had another colleague who told me about a student who wrote a letter to their former self. The student was 18, they wrote a letter to their 17-year-old self and just said, all of the things that you're about to go through in your 17th year, while they may be really difficult, are also going to be worth it because they make you into a stronger and wiser and smarter 18-year-old. And that was a pretty powerful essay to this particular colleague of mine. And then finally, I had a colleague tell me about an essay where a student wrote about a virtual reality that they've created. That's something that they're passionate about, is gaming and learning more about that. And they actually composed a piece of music that went along with this virtual reality that they included in the common application. So it was a YouTube link that the student said, I hope you go and listen to this music while you read my essay, but I understand if you don't because you're busy. But they had this accompanying piece of music that they composed to this virtual reality description of a world that they created, which is pretty cool too. So these are all examples of things that would be considered sort of like quote unquote mundane or sort of everyday, sort of run of the mill. I think that there can be some common misconceptions of the fact that your college essay has to be this grandiose and dramatic and traumatic tale that's going to, really grab my attention because it's so heart-stopping. And while I've read some essays that have been heart-stopping and, that I remember those, that doesn't have to be every case. I equally remember these essays that take something that is so maybe every day, so maybe nonchalant to you, but is unique to who you are and shows me more about your personality. I've had essays that have made me cry, yes, but does that mean that they are better than the essays that don't make me cry? No, that just means that they're different types of essays, and both are equally good, both are equally strong, both are equally memorable, right? So this is really the time that I want to allot to you all to ask questions, to, I want to answer any questions that you have about the college application process, about the essay itself, anything that I may be able to help you with. This is really, your time to shine. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Feel free to unmute to ask your questions, or if you want to just put it in the chat, I'm happy to read those and answer them as well. But this is really all about you and, what you want to know and learn about the essay itself. So.
Danielle, one thing I think is important for them to know is that I think they're also used to writing these essays that are pages and pages
Mm-hmm.
long, that sometimes less is more.
Yes. That is definitely a very good point. Sometimes less is more. As we saw two kind of different lengths in essays there, we also saw two different densities in essays. This is a really short piece that you're going to be writing. It's not pages long, and it is kind of important to learn how to get, the information across in a short amount of words. I remember from high school, I felt like I always had to push myself to write more. If my paper was 5 or 6 pages, I'd be at 3 pages and be like, all right, I'm done. What do I write now? So this is kind of the opposite of that, right? You have to pare down your writing and make it a little bit on the shorter side, make it concise. Less can be more in some aspects, as we saw with two kind of different density type essays there. And there is room for creativity. I've seen poems, the recipe that I mentioned, letters. It doesn't have to be like a 5-paragraph essay. You really can get creative with it. I would caution against going like super creative. I think that the Common App doesn't really allow for like special formatting. So if you wanted to do like a poem in the form of what it was being written about, maybe caution against that, just because the Common App doesn't really handle formatting that well. But I do want you to, be creative in this. It really is all about you. Are there any topics you don't like to see? That's a good question. And the short answer is no, there are no topics that I don't like to see. The long answer is that there are a lot of common topics, as I mentioned at the beginning. And I think that there's something to be said for the student who can write about a common topic and do it in a way that is memorable and unique to that person. But really anything that you choose to share with me in the essay is something that I'm going to take seriously. This is a time for you to share something with me. Some students have, talked about some pretty traumatic experiences in their life. Some students have come out in their essays. Some students have written about a family member that they lost. Some students have talked about some, really heavy things that have really affected them. And I take that really seriously, that you trust me and that you want me to know about this part of you that you may not show to other people. That's a pretty big deal. So if you wanted to write an essay and talk about that, you could. But again, like I said before, you don't have to make your essay a tragedy for it to be memorable. There are, a lot of essay topics that are memorable, that are unique to you, that tell your story in a different way, that allow me to know who you are on a deeper level. If you wanted to write a recipe about yourself, that sort of thing. So the short answer is no. There are no topics that I don't like to see, but there is a very long answer about that too. Other questions? This is really your time. I'm here to help you in any way that I can. I hope that this presentation has been helpful so far. But are there specific topics that you want to ask about? I'm not going to proofread all of your essays right now, but is there something that you wanted to run by me, or anything that I've said before that didn't really make sense? I'm really